let's go ahead and get started. Does anybody have any burning issues they want to talk about or want to get the group to contribute to?
Hey, Dana, I got a question.
Yeah.
I was going to post this in Slack, but here we are. So I am curious. I've started to come across more like, I'll call them opaque type of marketplaces. Baton was one that I started getting, and even, oh shoot, what's the one that we scrape for Acquira that requires a membership? So it's like basically the paywall marketplace. Does anybody have any experience? Because it just seems like it's just a really clever marketing tactic than it is like a source of legitimate deals.
Any comments? Anyone?
Oh, like Rejig as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't have it. I think that they're kind of marketing spammy because I get this like, here's a local one, here's one for you. They don't match at all. I emailed the founders and said, knock it off. And then they said, oh, you just need to update your settings. Those settings never happen and still get Denver or wherever else. I think they're all struggling to get traction. And so they're putting anything in front of us they can. My hot take. Anybody else?
It would surprise me if that were not the case. I think we've got a lot of, this is kind of a hot business in a way. At least that's my observation. Not having been involved in it as long as most of the people in Acquira, at least not in this way. But it sure strikes me that there are a lot of folks that are trying to market businesses or give the illusion that that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
And their quality, I see most, if not all, of the scrapes coming in the on-market side of the business, and there are tremendous differences in quality of just the information memos that people are putting out. I mean, some of them are 7 pages, have like 4 numbers that they're reporting, and then others are really thorough and give an awful lot of information. And generally, most of them leave a lot out. Some of that I would assume is by design, to get you to call and sort of, we want you on our email list, on our text list, on every list that we can possibly put together.
Yeah.
I don't personally do a lot of searching on websites. I go to them when I'm led there by a SIM or something that I want to find what else is there that they haven't provided us when we ask for it.
Cool.
Any other thoughts?
That reflects my observation as well. So
yeah, and it seems like almost every business these days it's kind of the behind the scenes model for a business these days is to get somebody's attention and get them on their list and then spam as much as they can. So what else?
Hey, Dana, I've got a question.
Yeah.
I'm kind of wondering how we should think about asset-heavy businesses.
Yeah.
I'm looking at a business right now that they want about $6 million for it, and it has about $3.5 million of assets in the business in the form of trucks and trailers and equipment that they rent out.
Yeah.
Right. And so, the multiple that they're asking for on this business is higher than normal. I mean, it's about 4.5x multiple, but I'm wondering how we think about these kinds of businesses. Like, do they justify a higher multiple in and of themselves because they have these assets? And then the other thing to think about is, these assets wear out and have to be replaced, and they sit, on the balance sheet. And when you have to replace this equipment, it doesn't show up in EBITDA. So you've got capital expenditures you have to make that aren't part of EBITDA, which makes it even worse. So, yeah, I haven't seen too much information about these types of businesses in the Acquira information. So I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Yeah. And there are probably quite a few folks here with perspective, and I'd invite their comments. I agree with you. An asset heavy business requires a constant stream of investment. And it also requires a constant stream of replacement, a constant stream of maintenance. And maintenance grows over time with these assets. So if you're looking at a company that's got a lot of trucks and they were all bought 15 to 20 years ago, and they've been maintained well, they're going to have all kinds of issues, and you better really don't assume that they've been maintained as well as what it's represented. Now the flip side, if you're financing, there are certain types of lenders that like financing trucks, like financing heavy equipment, that kind of stuff. But it doesn't, regardless of whether you finance it, you're buying it and you've got a capital investment, or you're leasing it, regardless, it's going to hit you one way or the other. If it's a lease payment, then it's hitting your cash flow. And you are not only, there are leasing companies that will basically lease, you'll put something down, but it won't be a huge amount. But you're paying some pretty high lease costs, and that will affect your cash flow. So I think the Acquira model, excuse me, is more of the and this is my interpretation. I could well be wrong, but the way I see it, the Acquira model with home services businesses and businesses that are really close to that definition, however you want to define it, they aren't typically hugely capital intensive. I mean, yes, electricians and plumbers have trucks, but they're not a rental business where part of the business model is to have equipment that you're renting out, or very heavy equipment that you need to do very big projects or that sort of thing. So I think I like the actual model that Acquira has in terms of the kinds of business that it encourages people to look at. But I also am observing that there are a lot of folks that are doing the same thing. There are other, I say a lot, I'm running across people that are selling those kinds of businesses. And to your point on the multiples, I think every broker in the country is trying to sell companies at higher multiples. I'm certainly seeing them with these information memorandums that are coming into us and that I'm shipping out to people. They are, higher and higher multiples, and they're also, I'm also seeing them fool around with, add backs that don't make any sense to me. And not only that, but they're talking about multiples, not of cash flow, but of SDE, which is another way of, you make it a multiple of SDE and then you jack the multiple on the SDE, and you're getting more for the, for the seller that you're representing. So it's kind of you need to be really careful in terms of paying up. And you've got to look at you've got to really think about and model your after-tax cash flow with what you are going to have to do. So you have to hire 3 people to replace the owner. I'm looking at one right now that he probably does 4 or 5 jobs, and he's reporting up, $700,000 SDE. But when you bring in people to take 3 or 4 of those jobs, that 700,000 is down to 400 or 5. So it can be deceptive, and you really need to think through the cash flow impact, the reinvestment impact of those kinds of businesses. I don't know if that helps.
Well, I think the root of my question is does an asset heavy business in and of itself justify a higher multiple than
No,
an asset light business?
no. What you're buying, it doesn't make any difference. It could be, it doesn't make any difference what the business is. What you're buying when you buy a business, this is the theoretical, and it's actually practical. The theoretical value of a business is the value of the future cash flow stream that it generates. Okay, that's what it is. And it's not just the cash flow stream, but it's the free cash flow.
Understood.
So when you have an asset heavy business and you're making capital expenditures, that detracts from cash flow to
Yes.
get to your free cash flow. So there are, does that help a little bit?
Yes, helpful. Thank you.
Okay. I mean, that is any good strategic advisor around the world is going to tell you that, that you're buying a future cash flow stream. That's the value you're buying. And the reason that the kinds of companies that Acquira encourages people to look at is because, they're fairly simple. They're not super heavy asset types of companies. And you can manage them and you can build a team and grow them. They're a fractured industry, most of them. And you can consolidate, the whole theory about buying one, using it as a stepping stone to buy others and bring them in. As long as you can manage how far distant you're going and manage different cultures and different people, then there really is a value proposition there, in my opinion.
Thank you.
So,
Dana, I had a question for you. You said there were add backs that made no sense to you. I don't know if it was to SDE or to EBITDA. Could you talk about that a bit?
yeah, sure. I was just looking at one. They were in the effort to boost the value to the seller. Brokers are going to they're going to take a fine-tooth comb to those financial statements and sit down with the seller and ask, what have you spent all this money on? And, did you use any of this for personal reasons? And you can kind of stretch that argument quite a ways. I just looked at one that, the guy in his business model was financing. He was actually personally financing the company's customers. So he was like providing a bank to another company that was buying from his company. And the only reason I can think of, there might be other good reasons, but the initial reason that comes to mind is they can't get financing to buy from him from a lender of sorts. And so he was adding interest charges and fees and all sorts of things back. And it just didn't make any sense to me at all. Now, maybe he could give me an explanation that would make some sense. There are others. They'll charge 3 or 4 cars in the company because, he's got 2 of them that he likes. And, you need to dig into each and every one of those categories, get the explanation, and then ask for proof. That's sort of and then you need to use your better judgment to see why is it that's being added back. One of my favorite ones is, the market value for somebody running this company is $200,000, and they're charging $300,000 and they want to add back $300,000. That's kind of getting to the SDE comment that I made a few minutes ago. But really, you'd only add back the difference between what he's taking and what the market value is of that for that role. So you can really understand what's the real cash flow that the company is generating to you when you right after you buy the company. The cost structure of that company is changing, and you need to factor that in to adjust between what they're telling you this thing is really generating and what it's going to take to run the company the way you need to run the company. So they may add a bunch back, or they may tell you that, you know, my SDE is $800,000, but the owner is doing 4 jobs. And to hire those people in is going to cost you a bunch of money. So you need to factor what that SDE or cash flow really is. You need to adjust it for what it's going to be going forward to know what your cash flow stream is going to be and what that coverage really will be of the debt that you're taking on to buy the company. Does that make any sense? I don't, might not have been as specific as you'd like, Penelope.
It does. How often, Dana, have you come across a company where the head of the owner was the responsible managing person, responsible managing plumber, qualifying party, any of those things? You know, they held the license that permitted the company to stay in operation, and maybe you don't see anybody coming up who would be able to take that over quickly within the company.
A lot of times you see that a lot.
Yeah.
And in some cases, you know, some people, let me think how to say this. There are some folks that, you know, they started 15, 20 years ago. They've been running this company. They grew it. It sort of got, it's a classic Acquira argument, and it's true. They reached the end of their ability to grow it because they've reached the end of their ability to manage it.
And they're tired.
Yeah, they're tired. They get exhausted and they're burned out and whatever the other issues are. So you'll find folks that actually plan for that. And people who are dealing with a good broker, the broker will get them ready a year or two ahead of time. You know, I would establish a relationship with people knowing, when I was with JP Morgan, knowing that, you know, they're not going to sell that company for 4 or 5 years, but I'm going to have a relationship with them and they're going to trust me. And I know every one of their families and I know everything they think and how they think about their company. And I know all their key employees. And by the time they're ready, I've already gotten them ready. So their company is financeable. That's at a bigger scale than what we're dealing with here. But the principle is the same. It's just a matter of the number of zeros and the sophistication of the owner typically. But we do see people like that here that are getting their company ready. And then you see folks that absolutely cannot do that. They can't let go. And the only time they're going to let go is the day they walk out the door. And that is that it can be hazardous to anybody buying it. So I don't know.
This issue of the qualifying party, responsible managing party, it's not a case in every industry. It's certainly a case in plumbing and HVAC, and I think probably in general contracting. It's not a case in roofing, landscaping, but it's a huge thing. You know, if you don't have a qualifying person, theoretically, you have to stop operating the day you don't have them. So.
A lot of times they will tell you that, you know, we have Joe over here that has the license, or they can get it within 6 months, whatever. Yeah. And there can be real issues with that. In that a lot of times, just because somebody has the master's license, whether it's plumbers, electricians, whatever it is, it doesn't mean they have the same skill set. And it doesn't mean they have the same experience. You can have a master's license.
And it doesn't mean they can pass the exams, because typically there's a business exam. Typically you need a net worth of something not very large, but you still need it. You can't have any kind of criminal background. And quite often, depending on the state, you have to appear to the board to be of good character, whatever that means.
Yeah, that can mean a lot of things. And where I was headed with that is that even if you have two people with a master's license and they work together day after day, and I've seen that within the last year, that one of them was far more capable of running a company and helping run a company than the other. And in one case, the first one, the owner with a master's license, he could do anything in the company. He could bid jobs. He could do them profitably. He knew what he had, and he was very confident of it. The other one had a master's license, had received it within the last year or so, and was not bidding, tried it, did not do well except on very small jobs, and then became intimidated. It's not the right word, but he became recalcitrant about bidding jobs, which is what the new owner was looking for. He needed that. And so he had to go out and find another master's license individual. That individual came in with a whole different set of issues. So it's, that is a very challenging, that is a challenging decision to make for somebody coming in as a new owner, unless you are just super confident, this person can do it, and you have high levels of confidence in them. I'd be, before I sign on the dotted line, I would be looking for help from the outside to bring somebody in that you are comfortable with. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, it's dealt with in the training if anybody wants to look at it. It's in 201-4, part of the last mile, where you need to go to find out what you need to get basically in a state, because every state is different.
That's exactly right. And some places, the requirements are different between counties that are side by side.
Yeah, like Florida.
It's absolutely wild.
Florida is one.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm just trying to alert you that your judgment when you're trying to make those kind of calls is really, really important. And talk to, if you're not confident that you're making the right call, talk to people. Find a mentor. That's part of what we do here at Acquira. And that's part of what these calls are for. So, and there are several folks on the team here that can be very helpful to you. But I tell you, there's nothing like getting in front of those folks. If you're going in, you're buying a plumber, electrician, you're not one yourself. And you're not allowed to meet that person beforehand, I would think twice about signing before doing that. You want to have, it's hard to assess somebody virtually. It's hard, it's way more difficult taking a seller's opinion on, that Joe Dokes over here can do my job real simply, no problem. If you're getting that kind of an argument, I'd question it. One of my mentors used to tell me, if there's something in your gut that's telling you, I just don't feel comfortable with that. His saying was, question your assumptions, and that proved to be very valuable to me on many occasions. So question your assumptions, and we've got a lot of smart people here that already know to do that, but have the confidence of your convictions is what I would tell you.
Hey Dana, I've got two things. One for Eric, a question for you. But Eric, on those asset heavy businesses, I've read that you can do a 504 loan on the heavy assets that have a useful lifespan of more than 10 years. You just need to find a banker that's willing to do it. And then some bankers are willing to blend your amortization on heavy equipment businesses and push out your loan maturity date, which makes your payments smaller. So, if you're thinking about those businesses, you could try and find some creative financing to make the deal work. Because I was looking at a couple of those recently.
That's a great point, Ben.
Yeah, I look at the 504 stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, First Internet, Alan, doesn't do 504, so you got to find a bank that'll do it.
Okay.
Dana, I got a question for you. What do you think about buying general contractors? I asked this question on the Slack channel a couple weeks ago and got Hayden's take on it. But there's a few that are on the market right now that I'm looking at. They sound like decent businesses, but I know there's a lot of ups and downs with them. I know to stay away from new residential construction, even if it's a custom home. But like, what are general thoughts along for GCs? Because I'm looking at a couple right now. They do like commercial stuff. Some of them do work for the municipalities, like the city, the government. Others of them do like a lot of painting work. Just a lot of different variations of that.
Yeah. So I would, before I could answer the question well, assuming I could answer the question well, I would want to know literally what kind of contractor in more detail. So if you got something and you wanted to talk about it, I'd be happy to chat with you. But contractors,
like a general contractor, like they're doing just like general construction work, whether it's like a home remodel or doing a remodel on a school or putting up a new commercial building. They're doing the smaller ones I've seen do a lot of remodeling, and they sub out all of the work. So they're basically like a lead generation firm and then a project management firm. At the end of the day.
I understand. My initial experience with general contractors was as a young banker and in Houston, and there were a lot of them that were in trouble, and I seemed like I ended up drawing the black bean because I dealt with a ton of them, and they are really they can be pretty challenging in a down market. In a good market, they can be just awesome in terms of being able to make money. And it really depends. One, assess the management on any company here, but for contractors, you really have to assess the management. And with them, they are a very different kind of company. Their cash flows work differently. They're a whole separate set of issues regarding bonding that can make or break companies and can prove to be challenging if they get into any kind of issues at all that impact them financially. What I used to see was general contractors that would decide they were going to go outside the market because they had too much competition in their market. They're going to go somewhere else and then get themselves in trouble because they didn't understand the market they were getting into. You need to understand how their jobs work and how they get paid. Just some very elementary kinds of things but you don't. Not all general contractors, especially at the sizes that we're seeing here, do the kind of things that would inform you really well. One of the things that I used to do with those guys is, when they started getting in trouble, I'd do it on a weekly basis, review their jobs in progress report. And I wanted to see the entire report, every job, and know that they were going through it once a week, maybe more often than that, depending on the amount of trouble they were in. But if they are religious about following those things and reviewing those with management and with the operations guys that are on top of the jobs, then they can run a good tight ship. If they're not, then they can kind of get away from you before you realize it. And they can also, if you've got a management team that is questionable. It's easy to take money from one job and use it to fund another. And you would never know it unless you were reviewing that jobs in progress report and you knew how much cost they'd incurred, how much cost they had paid for, how much they had billed, what percentage of the job is complete, all of that. So that is if you're looking at them, I would look up and find a comprehensive jobs in progress report and make sure you understand how it's supposed to work. In that way, you can really assess for yourself and ask questions if they're giving you information on 10 jobs that they've got going and they don't give you a whole lot of information on each job. That will lead you to specific questions about those jobs that will really help inform you about how solid an operation they have. I don't know if that's helpful. They get a lot of repeat business. That's a good sign typically, depending on who the customer is and how solid their customers are. Like the company I mentioned a few minutes ago to Penelope, where we have a guy here that, that just came in on a scrape, I think either this morning or Friday, that, the individual that owns the company is financing the jobs for his company's customers. So it's not on the books. That's a little, that is a little precarious for me. I don't particularly, I'd much rather see somebody borrow from a lender that is theoretically doing some kind of a credit write-up that they can, it sort of adds a little bit of credibility. But if Joe Dokes is financing a business, I would want to know how that works. And I just don't like the idea of it. You can get it. Most anybody that's got reasonable credit can get a construction related loan. So they'll follow it. They'll monitor the construction of the whatever the building or whatever it is. They'll finance it and then they can roll it into a longer term loan. But this guy is actually financing these loans and then letting people pay them out over an extended period of time. So it's hard to assess why he's doing that without talking to him. And it's pretty unusual. I haven't seen that before. I don't know if that helps, Ben.
No, it does in terms of like what kind of due diligence I can do to understand what their internal management structures are like.
Know who the management is, what roles they play. Ask a lot of questions about the jobs in progress report. Make sure you understand the vendor terms that they're getting. There was some other kind of a comment in this company's that I just mentioned in this company's write-up about them being given 90-day terms by, one or more vendors. I don't know how many there are, but it's nice to get terms, but 90 days is a pretty long stretch. I'd be interested in hearing that story. Just wonder why. Because if they're getting paid on their jobs, they ought to be able to pay their vendors. So if they're not getting paid on their jobs and they're stretching their vendors and they run into a hiccup, could get ugly fast, because that 90 could stretch to 120, 180, could stretch and be a really difficult situation pretty quick. So.
Okay, that's helpful.
What else going on, guys?
My question about tariffs. So I don't have anything in the LOI right now, so let's just say the mental mindset is at least a year out, right? But, talking to companies and pointing out to them like, hey, you're reliant on some places in China and other countries. Like, this is low data voltage installation, like data center running fiber, things like that.
Mhm.
Not exactly negging them, but pointing out like, hey, show me your certainty. Show me your certainty what it would look like. But putting aside each individual response from a company, what are others, and your advice, like the mindset on a year out? Is it just ignore what's currently in front of us? Is it come up with the best and a worst case and kind of have your numbers based off that? What's the thought there for the mindset, really?
And you're really speaking about tariffs and how to think about them?
I'm thinking about manufacturing when I look at like these companies who do a lot of wiring and they need to buy lots of networking cable and things like that. Lots of equipment for installing racks or pulling fiber across blocks, city blocks.
Yeah.
It's not as strict as or concerning to me as straight manufacturing where it's raw materials.
Right. I would want to know who their vendors are. I might do some research on the vendors. I would look up whatever the industry group is, and I don't know what the industry group would be for those particular companies, but whoever they're buying from, there are going to be industry groups. I would take a look at, in all likelihood, they're going to have a pretty informative website. I would take a look at that. I would definitely look at their monthly financials to see if you can determine any change in their margins.
I'm cold calling people right now. I'm doing a dance directly with the owners.
Okay.
Who we don't even reveal financials right now. I'm a little outside.
Tell me your background, Nick. What do you do?
Background is tech, but it's physical networking, cybersecurity, product management. I do product management consulting right now.
I think one of the things that I used to do, my background is obviously in finance as a former banker, and then I was CFO of a company, and I did a number of other things that all sort of had finance in the background, but a lot of operations and a lot of strategy. And I think I would take a look. I'm kind of thinking out loud here, but I think I would take a look on LinkedIn, see what friends you have that are still in industry that might have a little perspective in there. And what I used to do, I remember changing jobs a couple of times, and I would get in and look up somebody that has worked in the company that I'm interested in.
Yeah, I know where to go. Yeah, I've been seeing people post in some even Facebook groups, low voltage Facebook groups. They're posting, hey, our integrator above us is raising prices X, or who. There is a thread of who's raising prices.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is helpful. You got me thinking about that. I think I can get my answer, and I don't think I need to be as concerned about it, because when I get into the numbers, I'll be looking at the margins anyways and deciding tariff or not. God, there better be a healthy enough margin in here anyways.
Yeah, I think everybody on this call probably has a pretty decent network, and you may have a better one than what you think. But if you get on LinkedIn, you can call folks and say, hey, listen, I'm thinking of taking a job at this company, or I'm really interested in what that company you worked for 2 years ago. What are their challenges? What are they thinking now about X, Y, or Z? Do you know anybody I should call? And I'm telling you, the interviews I had when I did that were absolutely amazing, because I knew more about the company's challenges than they did. A couple of times I overplayed the hand, but it was better than going in blind, way better. And if you're trying to find information about that sort of, really, you're talking about business intelligence, and you can get that from people that have worked there. I wouldn't call somebody that's there now unless you know them.
Oh, yeah, I have some ideas, and yeah, you got me thinking. I think I know. I'm also going to look for a couple. I think when you and I talked, some companies that are near identical to what I want to buy here in Washington, but they're in different states, and so they don't care about competition, and they'll open up about what they're seeing.
Yeah,
And I can just go from there. Okay, yeah, this is some good food for thought, and it really tells me don't worry about the current state of tariffs or supply chains or things like that. You know, it's more about getting the deal under the wire. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Dan.
To me, it's good to be aware of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Where we're all at here trying to find a company to buy, you want to see the practical impact at the company level, and at their suppliers level, that kind of thing.
Yeah, thanks.
What else? Anything else, guys? I've got about 3:44. That gives us 15, 16 minutes. We can do whatever you like or talk about whatever you like. I think I'll just bring something up. I don't know if this may not be of interest, but in at least a couple of the prior AP calls that I've been a part of, the presentation anyway, I've really talked a lot about the human side of what you're doing. And I'm, my background is engineering. Then I got a master's in finance, MBA, and then went into banking. So most of my career has been in finance and strategy. And a lot of that came through work I did with JP Morgan, and that was really pretty revealing. But you can get really super analytical, and it's important to be analytical doing what you're doing. But I can tell you that you're all going to come up with a pretty decent answer as you do your analysis. I've met enough of you guys to know you're all smart. You've all got good educations. You know, lots of engineers. That kind of stuff doesn't intimidate you. And in fact, you'll probably gravitate to it. And that's important. But I can tell you that the human side of what you're doing is really where your money is made, because you're going to, or lost, you're going to have people of all different shapes and sizes and heights and, weights and all of that sort of thing. And your ability to connect on the human side with these folks and integrating with what they've been doing, integrating what you want to do with it and do it without a hitch. That takes some skill. You can do it. I haven't met anybody here. I haven't met a single Acquira client that I would not want to work with. And my sense is that it's easy if we're mathematically focused or analytically focused. It's really easy to kind of think, well, the human side just comes easy. Everybody sees the logic that I see. I'm here to tell you they don't. They just flat don't. And I don't tell you this to discourage anyone. I just tell you that question your assumptions, and really be on be tuned in and try to get yourself as smart as possible on dealing with people. How many of you, is anyone here going to the Chicago workshop in a week or two? Anybody going? Okay. I will tell you that I know the individual up there, and I also have met the individual where workshops are done down in Florida, where people will take a tour of those companies. I have not met the individual up in Denver, but I will tell you that those two individuals, the one in Chicago and the one in Florida, really have a great approach with people. They're easy to like. They're easy to follow. They're good leaders. So if you get a chance to meet them, just kind of watch how they think about and listen to how they think about their company and what they got themselves into, and what their decision points were, how they approached them, how they approached some of the people chassis the gentleman in Denver also did. But the people is where they're going to make your company successful or not. You're going to be smart enough to avoid, buying something that you can't pay for. But it's the people that are going to make that thing successful for you. And figuring out how to work with them is really important. And there's kind of a, you go in there and in a lot of cases, they're going to think, well, you're going to tell them on day one, I bought this company because I liked it. And I was motivated to buy it. And I like what you guys do. I like you've been successful. That's terrific. My thought is, and then you're going to go on from there, I'd like to grow it. You guys have made a success out of this company. I'd like to grow it, and I'd like you all to benefit from it. And so surprisingly, not everybody receives that message super well. You can deliver it properly, and you can deliver it well, and they will hear you. Because at that point where you're talking to them, they are all ears and they want to know what they're in for. So it can be a little tricky when you say, I've been watching this company for a couple months now, and I like the way we're doing the operations. I like the way we're doing this. I like the way we're doing that. But I think we can do something better to bring in more business. I mean, that's just one example. It could be, and you'd be surprised, you might get some pushback. And so it may take a little thought for you to figure out how to persuade that team that built that company to the point that you bought it. They may just jump right on board with you, or they may be somewhat resistant as well. And here's an argument you might hear, and sorry, John, but we tried that 3 years ago and it didn't work, so we're not going to do it again. It's easy to forget that they maybe didn't implement it very well, or they may not be thinking the same thing that you're thinking. But I just encourage you to get in touch with yourself and your ability to persuade. And the people you're persuading they're not your fellow tech execs. They're not, they may not have a master's degree. They may not understand anything more than basic algebra. But they will react. And if you do your job well, what you want them to say is, wow, that's a great idea. I think I have something that could help you do that. And if you can just get that once, you will be successful. Just find one low-hanging piece of fruit. They will follow you. And the worst thing you can do is sort of be the bull in the china shop and say, you're going to do it my way or else. If you do that, then you're going to turn off more people than you realize. And it's going to hurt you.
I agree, Dana. I think you have to go in very humble, and you have to be aware that you're the new guy around and you're kind of on sufferance for a while until you can prove your stuff, right? So you have to be kind of subtle and low-key to start. You don't foist Service Titan down their throats 3 months in. You get buy-in for something like that. Yeah.
So that's a good point. And there are a lot of those kind of points where, oh my God, we're going to have to do this. That's the first reaction. And then, you'll know, hopefully by the time you start bringing up potential changes with your leadership team, you know who you can count on to sell the idea. You've had some conversations with them. They're kind of getting on board. They will help you sell it to the employee base. So that's what you want. It doesn't always happen that way, but I think more often than not, it will happen in a very positive way. You just have to approach it correctly.
When you go in, they're assessing you very much. You have to be aware of that, you know.
There are ways you can ask questions as well. You know, if we do this, what happens over there? You know, is this going to affect so-and-so, or is this going to affect our customers in a different way? What are your thoughts about that? You can ask questions, be open, ask open-ended questions, and get them talking. And the other thing is spend some time with them. You know, have brown bag lunches, go out in the field and meet the techs, meet them for lunch, bring them some donuts for breakfast. I mean, any of that kind of stuff. They're going to think you hung the moon if you do it, you know, a few times. And that is there are plenty of things you can do that are just really simple. And you're not, there's a fine line between being the boss and being somebody's best friend. You're not going to be anybody's best friend, but you can foster mutual respect with every single person in the company, and that's where you want to be. So I don't mean to lecture. It's just sort of I've seen sort of both approaches in it, and taking the hard-nosed approach is not a good way. And the other thing I'll tell you is that a lot of these folks have been working for somebody that may well have been a tyrant for a long time, and you never saw it. And I've seen it with 1, 2, really 3 ACE assignments last year. I saw it. And that tyrant scares the employees, so they may not know that they can talk to you. And you want to encourage them. You know, guys, you know, one of my favorites is, I can't fix it if I don't know it's broken, guys. Tell me, talk to me. I don't shoot the messenger. There's another one. You know, they'll understand that in very clearly. And just make sure you don't shoot the messenger.
And that's the problem with letting the owner stick around for too long. You know, when the owner finally leaves, they might say they have these wonderful ideas that they come up with that they wouldn't have dared come up with whilst the owner was still there.
Yeah, so that with each of those ACE programs, employees had great ideas, profitable ideas, and the owner wouldn't let them do a thing. He didn't want to talk about it. Didn't want them to bring it up again. You know, so just handling people. If you can handle people well, you can be a tremendous success. You really can. So, in case you had any doubts, I don't think anybody in this group, you know, had any doubts about being able to be successful doing this, or you wouldn't be here. But the people are really where the money is made, in my opinion. Any other questions or comments? I think we're getting close to the end here.
Before we end the call, I'd like to just ask if you do have any questions. Kevin Cooper, the owner of the Florida business that Dana mentioned earlier, will be our next guest speaker on our next call. So feel free to let me know if you do have any specific questions, or if you do have any topic that you would like him to cover to be part of his discussion, so that we can shape the next session based on your questions. So that's it.
He is absolutely dynamite. He really, what a treat it was to tour his company with him. Mm-hmm. And you know, some of the things that he did were I've never seen before, and I've been in companies for over 20 years, 25 years, and never seen anybody do anything like what he's done. And it's absolutely very cool what he's done. And he won't, my assessment is, if I remember correctly, he won't tell somebody to do something he wouldn't do himself. And he demonstrated that while we were there with one of his warehousemen. And so you can learn an awful lot from him just listening to the story. In some of the things that he talked about, having to lose a couple of people fairly quickly because they were fighting him. You know, they were not going to allow improvements to be made, and they were working against him and against what his vision for the company was. So you can learn an awful lot from Kevin. So make it a point to attend when he presents. He's a great example of somebody you could emulate.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, Andy, anything else?
Oh, that's it for now. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining. And we hope to see you next week again.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.